amazing. It's such an honor. So, if anybody doesn't know, this is Eric Toledo. He's the lead singer for Quiet Hounds. He's an amazing graphic designer. He's a just an all around amazing human being. He's inspired my music and my writing for years now, and it's just such a pleasure and honor to have you on here. It's very exciting.
Oh, it's an honor and pleasure to be here as well, man. Thanks so much for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Yeah, we were talking about beforehand about like my journey and like building guitars, writing music, recording my own stuff, and I know that you homeschool, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this stuff is because I really was unschooled by my dad.
Mm.
So I would love to talk about like homeschooling and like the development of like musicians in that way because I was never formally taught.
Yeah.
I never had any formal education.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so you're talking about like how I came up music. Yeah, I mean, my parents always had just things around the house, So there was, an upright Baldwin,
Awesome.
and my mother was a pianist, a classical pianist.
Really?
Yeah, and she would play like for church groups and stuff. Nothing, serious, but she was good. So she tried to get me to write, to read early in my maybe my elementary career, and she's just, I wasn't into it. I really wanted to play the guitar.
Yeah.
And my dad had an old, 5 string laying around, steel string, and so I would, grew up kind of listening to him, and they had like, classical music blaring, and things like Frederick Handel and
Yeah.
Mozart, Bach, all the the masters,
Yeah.
and then like a lot of folk music around my house, like so
Yeah.
Peter, Paul, and Mary, and no, Harry Belafonte, and of course the Beatles and the Stones. So grew up listening to a lot of classics, and yeah, my dad came back from a trip to New Orleans one year. I must have been in like 6th grade or something, and he brought home like a a little harmony, acoustic guitar,
Yeah.
and it was just small enough for me, for me to wrap my little hands around, and I just fell in love with it, and I just, you know, uh, played classical guitar for a while. They sent me,
Yeah.
to lessons to learn a little bit of classical guitar,
Yeah.
but after that, it was just like, I was really interested in kind of practicing my voice, so,
Wow.
this is like late '90s, so like, um, uh, the big hair band thing was kind of dying down. Seattle sound was starting to ramp back up,
Yeah.
and I kind of found myself in that whole kind of era, like as I was discovering my voice, So had spent like a summer in LA, working at a first stop shop with my aunt, and after hours, I would just like sit there and play the guitar and try and figure out how to like play some of my favorite songs, and
That's awesome.
found my voice there. Yeah. And so it was just, a little bit of lessons, a little bit of like just things around like music that I heard that I really tried to emulate for a long time, through middle school and high school. And that was really what drove me. And then I had friends that just, were around that wanted to play with me, so I think that was just what we did growing up out in the, country. I was like 20, minutes just north of Athens, Georgia, big music scene, growing up watching, some of my favorite bands, play at, these awesome venues like 40 Watt and the Georgia Theater. And so that's, this whole idea of performing live was what drove me. And then being able to share that with friends around me, was a big deal growing up. So
That's amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
Funnily enough, my first guitar was a Harmony acoustic. I actually
Oh
still
yeah.
have it house, but it's a little like it's almost like a
Yeah.
ukulele guitar.
Yeah, yeah. This was like it was like a mid-size like
Yeah.
acoustic for, a 6th grader. I mean, like my dad's jumbo was a Gibson, it was too big for me to really kind of play, but so he bought me this thing, and it actually was a steel string guitar, but
Yeah.
we threw some nylon strings on it, and then, he kicked me over to some classical lessons at the University of Georgia, And I fell in love with that for a couple years, and then graduated to like a real classical
Yeah,
guitar,
that,
and
that's
then
just
yeah.
that's so cool. That's
Yeah,
so
and I think I learned a lot of, like, technique,
yeah,
playing classical, like the finger picking and just, a lot of the right hand technique that typically people bypass, they go straight
yeah,
to the pick, and, late '80s, technical stuff was really cool back then, like Joe Satriani and, those guys, like, you tried to emulate some of what those guys those great guitar players were doing, and, um, you know, Guns N' Roses was coming out, so it was just
yeah,
like, you had Slash out there on just tearing it, ripping up the fretboard, so, like, I was never ever that good, so when I learned, power chords, I was like, "Oh, wow, we can I like, every song has the same chords."
yeah.
So
I
it's just like, wow,
did. It literally when I was younger, like my dad, like I think he taught me like a few chords, but really what I grew up with an open tuned guitar because I
Oh,
was
cool.
guitar when I was a kid, like a baby, like a newborn. My dad
Yeah.
is,
That's smart.
yeah, because that's what happened. Like my dad, he like literally the first 3 weeks of my life, he played Os Mi Tantos, T Rex, and John Lennon
Yeah,
open
yeah,
guitar, that little baby guitar he got on tour, and
yeah.
jam with me. And that was like my first few weeks of life was jamming with my dad. And so I would just like just teach that,
Yeah. You
and
couldn't
like
go wrong. You're just like,
oh
"Oh,
yeah,
I'm just gonna" yeah, yeah.
really helped me like feel like oh that I can do this. Like I felt so confident. I thought I was like the best guitar. I was like I like swear I had my guitar. I went with it everywhere. And from that point on, I started like you said like learning chords and
Yeah.
I actually went to lessons once. Actually, only like a year ago. I went
Oh,
to
really?
yeah, because I've been playing guitar like just by like with my dad. He literally when I was a kid, he would just bring
Yeah.
me on stage just live. Like my dad,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he'd be like, James, we're playing now, and I'll be like,
What?
and
Oh,
it was
yeah, yeah.
that's how I like got good fast was really just like just doing it, and
Yeah,
it kind of
yeah,
just baptism by fire, and so like I loved it.
yeah.
The best.
Yeah,
I,
that's the best way to learn how to perform for
yeah,
sure. I mean, like, at most of my technique comes from just listening and
yeah,
trying to emulate what I'm hearing, and I'm sure a lot of that was, the same for you. And then now that, you kinda build the palette of, like, what you're capable of doing, you just start hearing things,
yeah,
and then start capturing those things and using the tools that you know. But it's cool because, like a lot of the same tools you can apply to other instruments, and those that sort of portfolio of stuff, just you can layer that into your work. I hear a lot of that in your work. That's really cool. So hey, Matt.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. So no formal training, right? Just a few lessons when I was like really young, and then but just we kind of have the same attitude with our kids at the house. It's just like, hey, let's just have it around. So if they're interested in pounding on stuff or kicking it around, like it's around. And Sam, and both my kids aren't really into piano or guitar, but like they're both into drums, so the percussion. So
I basically like my dad was a bass player at first, and I did play guitar, but I actually
yeah.
really got serious with drums to begin with.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you're playing percussion on and drums on all that stuff.
Some of it. I kind of a mix. I like to sometimes throw a sample and then play over it, or I chop up a sample and then like actually
Yeah.
add and then just use actually cut up a sample and use that as an instrument. It all depends. For Long Night, I did do like some of the smaller stuff, but for the main percussion, I just literally just grabbed a bongo, just threw it on there.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you know,
what's cool is it has, like, this, like, island like, vibe to it, and I don't know if you listen to, like, Porter Bryan or Patrick Watson, like, it's got this real kinda raw kind of, thing going on, very cinematic, so I really dig it, and it's pretty consistent, your catalog is pretty consistent, so, I can hear it, like, on a in a movie,
yeah, I
you know,
try
like
soundtracks. Like I did
Yeah.
sound for a local theater, for like a
Oh,
Christmas.
nice.
I composed the whole thing, just all original. And
Yeah.
I like adore Hans Zimmer and stuff. And
Yeah.
the way I really love to like process like sample audio because I hate the samples sound so canned, you know.
Yeah, yeah, uh-huh.
Like play the sample and then I actually hold up with this mic. This mic is special. It's from Funkadelic.
Oh,
I got
yeah?
seven. I literally got like they
Uh-huh.
got seven. It's like this is the only S77 I have. I need like you need to get a new
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Old and rinky dink. It's like
Yeah.
it's 10 times better. I literally
Yeah.
the frequency band is giant on this, and then the other one's like so squished and smushed, it's crazy. But anyway, what I was saying is that
Yeah.
I get a mic and I record so I play the sample off in the monitors and I record the room with the sample. And so the reason why it
Yeah.
so live and has so much movement is because of that
Yeah.
slight delay and latency between the sound coming out from the speakers and recording. I layer that on so it sounds like it's like super
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
hard. And so I call it bleed signals. And so I don't
Yeah.
know who does this, but it works so well. You literally just
Yeah.
record the room with the song playing.
Mhm.
You put a little guitar,
Mhm.
make it super
Yeah.
quiet, and it's like it sounds live. Because I'm only
Yeah.
playing.
Well, it does sound live. It does. I mean, you can hear the room. And it's got you've got like a vibe, and a very like a distinct sound. So, got to keep nurturing that for sure.
All this, it's actually just this Epiphone right here.
Oh,
What?
you but oh, y-
Gotta get close to the mic. Anyway,
oh
anyways,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Your dad's saying to get close to the mic. Yeah. So that Epiphone is what you're playing on most of your stuff.
yeah, like I don't know what it is, but like I have like a Martin and stuff, and it's like
Yeah.
more bassy. But this thing, it's a Nashville tuning right now. It's just all E strings, but
Yeah.
this thing, I don't really like Epiphones a lot, but they're
Yeah.
they're hit or miss. But this
Yeah.
thing, I've had it since I was a kid, and the high end on it, like that beautiful thing at the end, it's all just
hmm
guitar in Nashville, and it's
Oh wow.
unbelievable. It's like
Yeah.
that's this guitar. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
play it, but all
Yeah.
this is just unbelievable. It's all the credit to the guitar because it's just freaking amazing.
You got to give yourself some credit there, James.
Yeah, my guitars are my best friends. They're the nicest. But yeah, so what is like you've had a huge career. You've been playing music since the early 2000s, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, been in and out of several different bands, indie labels,
yeah,
publishing deals. I tell you, I met your dad on tour when we were in our first garage band. I want to say we were touring up the East Coast, and we did a few dates together, which is how I met your dad. But that band started in 2002. We had a bunch of songs that I had written out of college, and we got picked up by an indie label out of New York. And then, uh, uh, yeah, we did some touring on that record through like early 2000s to, almost, 2010. So that project was around for a while. And then we met a, a very talented producer by the name of Deke Spears,
yeah,
who was also a sound engineer. And he actually came and guest played with us in Austin, for South by Southwest, and also for some private shows in Austin. And that's how Quiet Hounds was essentially born, because we were talking to him about the kind of music we wanted to write. At
yeah,
the time, what we were doing was pretty heavy. It was like a garage kind of rock
yeah,
outfit. And we just wanted to do something a little bit more lush, something that sounded a bit more mature. And we just had other ideas that weren't, straight up, for the floor, like, big giant guitars, like blowing
yeah,
your brains out. I still love that stuff.
yeah. Sure.
But like, we would learn that we were way more versatile than that. Yeah, but with the right kind of players behind you, you can do a lot. You can
Sure.
kind of go in a lot of different directions. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's I love Francis Sark and Quiet Hounds. Like, but you're right. It has this like there's a difference. There's this like lush like there's a depth to like
Yeah,
like
Yeah, I mean, Francis Ark was built around the live rock show, right? So, like, we wrote songs to, like, get up there and just turn it up to 11 and
Yeah,
rock,
yeah,
and we were on tour with, like, the Wigs, through the Midwest, and we just loved that whole scene, being able to bring some big rock to the stage. But, there's something about, like, being able to bring all of that to, some,
yeah.
discipline, and being, really more critical of the tones that we were using to, like, articulate our ideas. Um,
Like
uh, uh
like there's a
yeah, yeah, and broaden that because, I mean, I was playing keys, and it didn't have to be just, like, a Rhodes on the stage. Well, I
yeah,
had a whole kind of, world of synths and sounds to tap into that I hadn't really tapped into yet, so, Quiet Hounds was a chance to do that and play with, like, old instruments that we had around the studio that we had never really just, dusting things off and going, "Oh, we never really used this before, let's try this," and bringing a lot of sort of unique sounds into play, for that first record. But it was never really intended to be a band. It was just,
really?
hey, we're curious about what it would be like to write with this guy. So
Wow.
a few of us spun off, yeah, and we had a few songs. We were like, hey, let's experiment with writing some new stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and then, y one song turned into 2, 2 songs turned into 5, and next thing we knew, we were sitting on an EP. I'm like, "What are we gonna do with this?" So we, shared it with a few friends. They're like, "Oh, you guys gotta, like, get this out?" And we shared it with, a friend of ours who just happened to be just an amazing, uh, promoter, and she shared it with a bunch of blogs, and it kind of took off, had its own kind of, I don't know, it grew its own legs and started walking on its own. And the rest is history. We we circulated that record. People started picking it up, and we decided we'd play a few shows. Maybe we'll play for our parents and a couple friends. And this would have been early 2011.
Yeah.
And we show up and the room is packed with like 3 or 400 people, and we didn't know any of them.
That's unbelievable. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, that was our first show, and, we had
really
yeah, at that time, we were wearing masks, because
yeah,
we didn't we were on a publishing deal. We didn't want our
yeah,
publishers to know that we were publishing music. Um, and so we showed up wearing masks, and, um we took them off, and the funny thing is we heard rumors that, people thought we were someone else, like, they thought we were, like, members of the Black Keys or, some other
that's
like, "Oh, it's gonna be a rude awakening when they see who we are." But, they were aw like, Trav was awesome, and, we follow that up with, a handful of shows,
wow.
uh at this place called the Goat Farm in Atlanta, with the capacity around, 7, 800 folks. Our shows would get pretty big from there. And we've just kind of held that following ever since. That was, gosh, almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So 2012, we're 22. I mean, been playing music with these guys for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, but these things are fun for us, fun for me, like, when you're like, hey, your dad reached out, you reached out, hey, I got some songs. I listened to the catalog. I was like, man, this guy's amazing. I love your stuff. It's just so original and so refreshing to hear such raw sound. Uh, and yeah, so I'm always happy to collaborate like that. I
Yeah.
hear something, it doesn't take much for me to kind of hear a sound and hear a melody. And it, I think I'm probably a better producer than I am a songwriter because your dad was like, "Oh, here's some lyrics you should try. Here's an idea I have. Maybe you can like, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll take, a little bit of what your dad gave me, a little bit of like, well, most of everything that you wrote. I mean, I didn't change. I don't think I altered uh, the composition at all. That was like perfect. So I just kind of layered on top of that.
Yeah.
So.
No, no, it didn't hit me. Yeah, thank you, Dad. I mean, not Dad. Anyway, thought the mic was muted. He
Oh,
can hear me.
oh, okay.
YouTube went silent. It's just probably just the internet. But yeah,
Mm,
thank you. I'm flattered.
yeah.
Yeah, like you were unbelievable. Like I literally like like sent it, and I was like, Dad, is he gonna actually respond? I bet he's pretty busy. And my dad's like, no, and then like I was just like waiting, and I was working, and I kind of forgot about it because I'm working on another album right now, and it just came back, and my dad was like, it's back. It waited. We loaded it up on the monitors, and I was flabbergasted. It was unbelievable. Like, what mic did you use on it? It sounded so good.
Thanks, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like it's I have a pretty simple setup at the house. It's I just have a Apogee duet, and I have a condenser mic,
Yeah,
and so it doesn't take a lot for me to kind of like um perform the thing. The most uh the sort of heaviest part of the process is just kind of like really absorbing, because the guys will send me stuff all the time,
yeah,
kind of absorbing like the idea, and listening for what the song wants to be about,
yeah,
and so and it made it a lot easier like having some lyrical content to kind of work with, so it wasn't like I was pulling that out of thin air. It was like taking the vibe of what you created and this idea of not being able to sleep and like having just sort of like this long night ahead of you.
yeah,
And I could it just kind of those two ideas just really worked well together. So I was just really more of a conduit, like the glue, like all the pieces were already there. So
really. Yeah, thank you. It was, I was like really like a very like instant thing. So what happened was is I like released my album Silhouettes, that classical album, and I was at a loss to like, 'cause it's all this music set out, all this stuff like that I wanted to get done. I had like albums, because I have albums that I
yeah,
recorded that I have not released. I just need to finish them, and they're like
yeah,
Latin album, jazz album, all these different things that are like these songs that are recorded and they're like almost there. They need like, oh, I need to do this or add that. Because
yeah.
I'm a neophile. I can't stop creating things. It's just
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, you should never stop. I mean, I think that's you're very prolific. I think that's the one thing, that well, you've got a lot of things going for you, but like if you just keep doing that, I mean, and collaborating with a lot of different people, I mean,
yeah,
not just me, but like anybody else you might want to reach out to and do this kind of thing. It just takes a handful of folks, that you really trust, and if you want to make music with to really kind of get off the ground. And um, someone says that they can hardly hear you, Patricia Valentine. Maybe give it some more juice,
yeah, I
James.
will.
I would switch the mic off of no. I would switch it to this.
Just switch it to the computer.
Yeah, because this is loud in
Yeah,
here, and it's already echoing, and you're barely able to whisper on that.
really.
Yeah, so just turn all this off and just use that.
Okay, I'll just
It's distorting
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
If
When your
When
dad's
your
gone.
dad's gone.
All right, now
I
I
know
can't
I
hear
can't hear
you,
you,
but I'm
but I'm
hearing
hearing
a,
a,
echo on my
my
end.
end.
Oh, uh-oh. Are you, now it's distorted. I don't know what happened. Patricia, can you hear me at all? Oh yeah, she can hear me. I can't hear you though. Still. Nope. Um, we're not getting any sound from you, James. Yeah, no sound on this side. Um,